Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. I just took a swig of coffee, I went down the wrong way. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the lack of mixed race social integration. Now, we've all been fed this utopian view where everybody is in love and gets together, and they're all, every race marries every other race, and there's no difference. Nobody's any different from anyone else. The IQ 70 African peasant from the middle of nowhere, he's exactly the same as the IQ 140, 150 white, rocket scientist, and they're the same, exactly the same. No difference. But we know, of course, that there are a lot of differences, and we know that people from these third world countries, they want to hang around with their own people. They create enclaves. They create ghettos. They do not want to integrate. They do not want to, become part of the Western society. They want to very much keep to their own attitudes, customs, habits, culture, outlook, and the whole thing. And to do that, they have to intermarry amongst their own genetic stock. Now, sure, they want the free stuff. Sure, they want to come to the nice rich West and parasite off the rich society that white people have built up. Sure, they want to do that, but they don't want to have anything else, and don't want to have anything to do with white people and white society otherwise. And to pretend that they do is, now there'll be exceptions, by the way, but to pretend that they do is simply nonsense and quite delusional. Now, there's an area of Sydney where the first sort of tranche of mass migration began in the later 1990s. So the people have been here for about 30 years. And, when they arrive, they madly pump out as many anchor babies as they can. They usually arrive pregnant anyway. And 8 months pregnant when they arrive. So many of them had, they've got one when they arrive, another two just to sort of nail it completely. So they've got 3 anchor babies. And so all these children have grown up in Australia. They've been through the entire Australian school system. They've been socialised. And when this first tranche, when they'd have arrived, they'd have been surrounded by other white kids. They weren't sort of special Chinese schools or Indian schools or this sort of thing back then. That you had to, so the Chinese kids coming in would have been in a classroom that had was majority, as in 90% plus majority white. So now this has changed now, of course, but back then that's what they'd have had. So pretty much all through their entire schooling, they would have had nothing but, or mostly at least, white fellow students. So how well have they socialised into Australian society? Well, I had to go to that area or drive past it, so I thought I'd pull in on a busy shopping day, and it was last weekend actually, and have a look, and just sit there with a coffee at an outdoor cafe and just sort of watch the passers-by. And it was a busy day, and I purposely picked the epicenter of the main sort of mall and thoroughfare, so a gazillion people were passing by, and as best I could count, less than 2%, 1.5%, something like that, were mixed race relationships. I'm speaking here of intimate relationships, or that appear to be, at least. And some of those were gay LGBTQ relationships. So also some of them looked like young Asian chick with old white guy. I mean, she was dolled up like a hooker. So I don't know how many of those are just natural organic relationships. I would think like the LGBTQ, they want to be alternative because it's the cool thing to do. So you got to have if you're a white lesbian, you got to have like an Asian or a black lesbian lover, because that just shows how woke you are. So I don't know how natural and organic they are, or how long those relationships would last. Even looking at, let's say, senior high school type age kids who are dating, it was Chinese with Chinese, Indians with Indians, Filipinos with Filipinos and that sort of thing. The Filipinos probably do integrate more than a lot of the others, as in intermarry and procreate. But it was extremely rare. And again, we're in a place where this is the first tranche. So all these kids have been throughout the whole Australian education system, and most of them would have experienced nothing but white majority schools and classrooms. And, they'd be getting on public transport, where back in the day, they'd have been part of a handful of Asian kids amongst a great white majority. But they're hanging around with their own kids. Now, if you look at sort of bunches of school-age kids going around, again, it was the Chinese group, the Indian group, very, very little, very rarely were there any, even one, say in the all China. Now, I noticed in the all Chinese or even the Indian groups, they would have some dorky, dweeby, outcast white kid there as some sort of token or mascot. I don't know what they do. Do they bully him, or is he some sort of joke that they keep there, like a court jester or something? Also, when you look at the majority of the mixed race relationships, they're people at the bottom of the scale. The least attractive people who probably would struggle to get a date even in their own racial group. So, but again, they've got that outcast sort of outsider. They're so ugly that they're on the periphery, so unattractive that they're taking whatever they can get. That just happens to be another unattractive person with another race. You don't see hot-looking people, good-looking people. They must exist somewhere, but you just don't see them. The only mixed race I saw were what I would regard anyway as the least attractive people. So clearly it's not happening. The kids are hanging out in their own groups. 13, 14, 15. Girls too. Girls not so bad. The girls will again have some sort of token minority in their group. So if it's the Indian kids, they'll have a white girl or a black girl or a white girl, actually, mostly the Indian. Chinese the same. But that appears to be more an affectation rather than a natural organic thing of, you're my friend, I like you, you share my views, or we have things in common, or we just get on well. I think it didn't appear to be that sort of synergy going on, certainly not from what I could see anyway. So we can assume that the racial integration, as in mixed race racial integration, has been an astounding failure, a failure of the first magnitude. And after all the propaganda, after all the years, after all the time, the integration just isn't taking place. It's a rarity. I mean, it's happening, but it's a rarity. What could be done given the time, the propaganda? You can't switch on or look at any program these days where every white guy, his best buddy is always non-white. The chick he's dating is always non-white, and it's perceived in the propaganda it's a problem white people aren't integrating. If we fix that problem, then everything's fine. But it's not that. It's got nothing to do with that. That's absurd to even suggest that. The Chinese, even I remember there was a Chinese kid at the school I was at. There was a Chinese kid, and they'd even anglicised his name, but his name was like Wong Tong Chin or something, but they changed his name to Jimmy or Jack or something like that. And he worked at his parents' Chinese restaurant, and looked like they're doing okay, actually. And I bumped into him quite some years later. Now, he was born in Australia in, I don't know, would have been the 1960s or something. And he when he did, and again, there were I think he was the only Asian kid in the school, for goodness sakes. And yet he still, they sent to Hong Kong or somewhere in China to get a bride to come out. So he ended up sort of marrying another Chinese girl, even though he'd known nothing other than white, local society. So that just shows how much the in-group preference is with Chinese and Indians and so on. Now, given all the business traveling I've done, I've noticed in places like Singapore and Hong Kong and Kuala Lumpur and Philippines and those sort of places, the women there were very keen to attach, single women were very keen to attach themselves to a white guy with money. Because the white guy, say in Singapore as an example, the expat workers, the white guys, working for the banks or the big tech firms or something, they had the nicest houses and apartments. They had nice cars. They always had money and nice food. They always, were going on vacation to somewhere like the Philippines or wherever. So they were always looking for that. And the amount of times Chinese chicks would, like when I was in these places, Chinese chicks would hit on me was just phenomenal. I mean, it was, I couldn't go anywhere without being hit on. And I'm not into Asian chicks, so it was kind of a wasted effort with me. But I noticed just how keen they were to shack up or hook up with a white guy, or as they called it, a Western guy. And the men, the Chinese men in these places were quite open about it. It was hard for them to get laid because all the girls, let's say in Singapore, for example, all the girls wanted to, as the local boys would say, they all want to fuck a Western guy. So they were feeling a bit left out there. But once you take away the money, as in the attraction of coming to the West is that these are rich economies, the West, and they're coming from largely poor economies. So whereas the welfare system is your family in a poor country, in a rich country, the welfare system is what all the goodies the government hands out and gives to you. So you don't have to put up with your nagging relatives anymore. You can just come to the West and get free everything. Hey, that's not a bad gig. So they're not not coming to integrate or be part of the system. Far from it. They want to bring over their whole village and family, all those sorts of things. So when you look at this idea of social integration, there's no signs that it's happening. Maybe it's sort of a pressure valve that's building up, and there'll be a sudden flood of mixed race marriages. But without there being some sort of inducement, like you pay less tax if you marry a black person or something, or unless there's some sort of very material and very obvious manifest inducement to do it. People won't do it organically. They just plain won't do it. And I noticed that even young Indian girls or Chinese girls that may date white guys, when it comes to marriage, the families are usually quite severe. They won't have it that you marry outside of the genetic diaspora. And I've known Indian women who wanted to actually get together with a white guy. But the family, the wider family, have threatened excommunication. You'll be an outcast. You'll never get anything in our will. You won't get a penny, and no one will speak to you again, and all this sort of stuff. And so they just eventually get ground down under the pressure that they just have to marry they're going to get a husband or a bride from India and from the village of their ancestors, and that's it. And there are Indians that have been in the West 5, 6, 7 generations that are still sending back to the village of their ancestors for husbands and brides. So if the Western governments want to do something, they've got to stop this the bringing the husbands and brides in from overseas. Got to stop that. That has to stop. And I think if they did that over a period of generations, you would begin to see a level of integration. And it's going to have to be steps like that are taken if they want some element of, because the Indian society has to be broken up, but as in the Chinese one does. They have to be just live like everyone else and share everyone else's values. And at the moment, that is so far away from happening that I can't see the necessary groundwork, the necessary sort of underlying ballast for mixed race relationships and social integration that would come from it. That's just not going to happen. It's not there. There's no impetus for it, and there's no, if you like, social architecture in place that would facilitate it. So I've got quite a bleak view of the future. Now, what this means, of course, if there is no social integration, or very little, it means that they're going to be tribal racial groups that will balkanise, particularly the politics, and balkanise the economics of the Western countries, which will be ruinous for all of us. and it will achieve nothing. But these people, they can't perceive those sorts of things. They only see today and how much they can take today, and that's all they see. And once it's all gone, they'll just sit around, oh, well, we had a good time while it lasted. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.